There we are. On behalf of Dubai World Trade Center and GISEC, a very warm welcome and Ramadan Kareem to everyone participating in today's GISEC's first virtual event. As most of you know, GISEC is the largest and most impactful cybersecurity show in the region. And in order to shorten the time a little bit until we can see each other again live at the Dubai World Trade Center later this year, we have taken the initiative to start GISEC.Virtual. This platform shall give all of us the opportunity to continue our discussions and stay connected in these rather difficult times. We hope that you will enjoy today's webinar, but before I hand over to Peter Hopwood, our moderator for today, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all frontline workers on behalf of Dubai World Trade Center for their efforts to safeguard the health and safety of global communities. But now, let's get started. Peter, over to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're delighted to be beaming this to you literally across the world for this long-term impact COVID-19 webinar on cyber security. So just a few things before we begin. So just a few house rules. So you'll see at the bottom of the page, there's a Q&A function. And this simply is for you to ask your questions. Am I back? There we are. Just simply for you to ask your questions to the panelists during this 60 minutes. So you have a question you want to ask, you're eager for one of the panelists to answer it, just pop it in and hopefully we'll get through that question during the time we're together. We also have a chat function as well. I can see right now a lot of you have already discovered that already. We'd love you to introduce yourself, tell us or show us where you are and how you're connected perhaps with the cybersecurity world as well. And remember, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So your questions, we also have polls as well. So when these pop up on the screen, simply we'd love you to answer the poll and then we'll be showing those results as soon as we can, just to get a bit more of a flavor of really who's out there and your opinions as well. Right, so let's jump in straight away. I'm sure you'd like to know who our four panelists are. I'm sure you already know already, but let's start off. So first of all, from Cleveland Clinic, we have Saqib Chowdhury. Saqib, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Where are you right now?
Based in Abu Dhabi.
Fantastic. If you can just give us maybe a couple of sentences about who you are and why you're here today on this panel.
Absolutely, Peter. Good afternoon and Ramadan Kareem, everyone. My name is Saqib Chowdhury and I'm responsible for the Information Security Program at Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. Glad to be on the panel. Just a few opening remarks. Since the COVID-19 situation began, cyber attacks have quadrupled as compared to the months before the pandemic. One would have hoped that since this pandemic is impacting all of us across the globe and cyber criminals being human, we would see some respite in the number of attacks. However, unfortunately, that has not been the case. Sadly, the healthcare and education sectors are some of the worst or most targeted across the globe. And since most of us are now working from home, cyber criminals have directed their focus towards activities that can reach us directly in our homes. Therefore, it is very important for us all to exercise good cyber hygiene and be extra cautious in these trying times. Over to you, Peter.
Fantastic. Thanks for being with us today. Next, we have from Rapid7, a gentleman called Richard Mosley. Richard, are you there?
I am indeed. Hello, everybody.
Hi, where are you right now? I can see it's quite sunny where you are. I wonder where that is. What part of the world are you in?
It is. I'm at home on a farm in Wiltshire, just outside London in the UK. Beautiful sunny day here.
Sunny in the UK. That's quite surprising.
Indeed, indeed. But thank you, pleasure to be here. So my name's Richard Mosley. I head up our sales and growth for Rapid7 internationally. So I've had the good fortune of working with customers and partners from hundreds of different countries around the world over the past few weeks, really working with them and understanding as COVID has moved through and become really apparent in each of those territories, the effects that they had, and hopefully the outcome of some of that will be useful in today's session.
Thanks for being with us today, Richard. Again, I'm sure it will be useful and insightful over the next 60 minutes or so. Next, we have from Spire Solutions, Mr. Sanjeev Walia. Sanjeev.
Hi, Peter.
Hi. Where are you right now, I wonder?
I'm based in Dubai.
Fantastic.
At my office currently.
Okay. Tell us about your role.
Ramadan Kareem, and good afternoon to everybody. I think it's going to be a very good discussion considering the circumstances we are in and the cyber criminals being overactive. So I think we learn a lot from this interaction with the panelists as well as people who are attending it. Fantastic.
Thank you for being with us today. And our last panelist of our quartet today is from Frost & Sullivan, Mr. Saurabh Verma. Saurabh, you're there. I can see you've just popped up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ramadan Kareem. My name is Saurabh Verma, and I manage the ICT practice for Frost & Sullivan for the Middle East region. I'm based in Dubai, been in the region for almost 8 years now. Frost & Sullivan, as some of you might already know, we primarily work with both the supplier as well as buyer community, so pretty much cover the complete ecosystem. And I'll talk about it a little later when I'll start presenting my slides. Peter, over to you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So as you can see, quite a distinguished panel full of experts who know really what we're about to talk about. And as I say, after this 60 minutes or so together, hopefully you'll have more of an insight, more of awareness of really where to go next and the next steps in these unchallenging times. I'm just looking quickly over to the side at the chat bar there. Again, a shout out to everybody who's joined us. Again, if you've just joined us, let us know, introduce yourself, let us know who you are, where you are. I can see we've got people from literally all over the world, Netherlands, from Bulgaria, Ireland, Asia. So again, if within your network, you know someone that would be interested to hear what we're about to talk about right now, share the link out, let them know, and then we can have the more the merrier, and the more people can see and hear some of the ideas that we're sharing right now. Right, we're going to kick off right now. So we've already heard from our panelists. We'd like to hear from you right now. So we're going to pop up a poll, first question in our poll, and we'd love you to read this and answer it straight away. So here we are, poll number 1. Has your organization witnessed any threats, e.g. phishing, malware, spam, disguised as a COVID-related information or document in the past few months? So if you could answer that question for us right now. And what we'll do, we'll compile those results together. And as soon as we've got the results for that, they'll pop up on the screen just in a few moments. So here we are. So as you can see, yes, 33%, a little bit higher in the no category, 42, and a 25%, quarter of you are really not sure what the answer is. So if I could ask Richard, how are you making sense of these results?
Well, it's not surprising to see that some organizations and people have seen more. You know, I think from one's own email flow, we've seen more phishing mails than perhaps prior. I think it's also, a situation that we're all under pressure. There are lots of changes, people working from home, often logging into new assets or new processes, working with new people. That pressure and the sense of urgency and immediacy for everything has caused stress. And, you know, when people are under duress and stress, we are more likely to make mistakes. So it's really unsurprising. It'd be interesting to see if it was a global poll, how many, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a majority actually coming up there with more attacks.
And it's interesting to see a quarter are not sure. So they're probably not really aware of what they're looking out for and how to identify something that is disguised as something that has wrong intentions. Okay, what we'll do right now, we're going to hand straight over to Saurabh now. He's got some more data, more insight on some of the trends, and straight over to you, Saurabh.
Thanks, Peter. If I can have the slides up, please. Excellent. So, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Saurabh Verma. I manage the ICT practice for Frost & Sullivan from Middle East. Frost & Sullivan, as some of you may know, we are primarily an advisory and strategy consulting firm. We are structured by different industry practices. So we are structured. We have got some dedicated practices for very, very specific industries. For example, healthcare, automotive, oil and gas, chemicals, education, as well as public sector. And I manage the ICT practice for the region, which is more of a horizontal practice, and it cuts across different vertical practices that we have. I think what I'm going to do is that, as Peter mentioned earlier, we are going to make it very, very interactive. So the way we have structured this entire webinar is that I'm going to present some statistics, some data points, some of our opinions that we have observed from the marketplace in terms of through our interaction with various CXOs, as well as cybersecurity professionals, as well as some of the suppliers as well. I'll talk about that, and then I'm going to jump right back to our panelists as well and ask for their opinion as well on the same topic. I would like to start with a very, very interesting quote that I read recently. This was actually by one of the ex-FBI chief, Robert Mueller, and he once said that there are only two types of organizations in the world. One that have already been hacked, and one that will be attacked or that will be hacked. So which actually tells me a very, very interesting point, that in the current scenario, as much as cybersecurity is about prevention and remediation, it's also more about rebounding. It's more about how quickly can you recover from an attack once that happens. So it's more about the recovery as well, as much as it is about prevention as well. I think another point that I would also like to highlight, and just taking a clue from what Saki mentioned earlier, these are very unprecedented times, and especially, if you look at industries like healthcare, education, these are massively impacted, and these are really very, very aggressively attacked by cyber attackers as well. And there's a very famous quote mentioned by one of the politicians that never lose an opportunity during a crisis. And I think more than the politicians in the current scenario, it's actually the cyber criminals that are trying to focus on that particular quote and try to maximize this opportunity as much as possible. Just to put some more context to it, couple of weeks back, I think earlier this month, Google actually announced that every day they're actually stopping almost 18 million scam emails, which are basically disguised as COVID-related information. And if that doesn't surprise you, Google also announced that they are actually blocking more than 100 million phishing emails, again, which are related to COVID-related information, and they are doing it day in, day out, pretty much every day. So that's the kind of environment that we are living in currently. Moving on to the next slide. Now, this slide basically talks about some of the major challenges that enterprises are facing in the current scenario. The first one, obviously, given the scenario that we are in currently, that there's a lot of pressure on the cash flow, there's a lot of pressure on ensuring the margins, profitability, and at the same time, ensuring that we are trying to hold on to as much cash as possible within the organization itself, which obviously means that there are budget cuts across the board. And given the dynamism or the way the region works, we have always seen a trend wherein, bulk of the work primarily is being done on-site. The whole concept of offshore delivery has not really taken up very well in the region so far, which is why, one of the major challenges for most organizations is basically the limited number of ICT resources to meet the demand itself. And at the same time, there's obviously a lot of pressure from on the IT teams as well to basically, provide support 24/7, because our workforces are actually working remotely. I mean, look at education segment, for example. Globally, almost 98.5% of the students or learners are actually learning from home. There are no schools. I mean, imagine out of 100%, 98.5%. And obviously, there's also a lot of pressure on the IT teams as well to ensure that there is a proper delivery, that it is uninterrupted, it is secure, and everything is business as usual. It has to be delivered to various teams as well. Now, with all of this, it obviously puts a lot of pressure on the cybersecurity as well. And some of the industries like healthcare and education, as well as e-commerce, retail, I would say these are the industries that are very, very heavily targeted by cyber criminals in the current scenario, which again puts back a lot of pressure on the IT team to ensure that they are delivering services in a proper way, their networks are secure, the endpoint devices are secure, patch management is done on a regular basis, and all the tools that they are managing, or all the tools that they are running currently are absolutely in line with how they should be ideally. At the same time, I think one of the other interesting trends, which is, I would say, it's basically a catch-22 situation for a lot of organizations, basically is because of the fact that there are budget cuts across the board. On one side, there are a lot of digital transformation which are getting delayed to ensure that organizations are keeping as much cash as possible. But at the same time, if you do not move towards digital transformation, then you are also going to lose a competitive advantage in the long term. So that is a kind of, I would say, some of the major trends or some of the major challenges that we have seen across the board in the region as well as in the global markets. Now, let me just take a pause here, and I'll go back to my panelists. And Saki, maybe I will start with you, and I would ask you that what is your observation on some of the points that I've mentioned? Do you see a similar trend in the region as well, or do you see that there are other bigger issues as well, or there are any other bigger trends as well that we should also be talking about apart from the ones that I've covered?
Absolutely. I think you were spot on. I'm going to start off with the cost rationalization point. So even before COVID-19, actually Q3, Q4 of last year, organizations started looking into cost rationalization because there were strong indications of economic downturn. The indications were there even I guess before then, Q2, Q3 time frame. So cost rationalization was already on the mind in terms of many organizations. However, COVID-19 just amplified that requirement. So now organizations are even more rapidly looking into ways to rationalize cost, not only within technology, but across the organization, across the business. So that's point one. Number two, you talk about digital transformation on hold. It may be true for some of the projects, which may not be considered essential given COVID-19, but on the contrary, there are other projects, transformational projects, which actually were expedited. Like, for example, in our case, we expedited tele consultation with our patients, considering that the amount of our patients may not be comfortable coming into to hospitals given the COVID-19 situation. So I think on one hand, some of the projects may be put on hold, but then others were put on expedited terms to get them out there, rolled out. And then what I've seen organizations do is they're looking into, they're in a situation where they're not looking for perfection. You may have heard of saying that perfection is the enemy of good. So the idea right now is to do whatever it takes to get the essential technology out there and then mature it over time. And lastly, I'm going to talk about from a cybersecurity perspective, mainly what have we seen as change, and what was our approach to look at cybersecurity concerning COVID-19. We did a quick assessment to see how the cyber threat landscape has changed due to COVID-19. And we realized that most of the threat, and we have discussed this earlier as well, were related to social engineering, mainly phishing and spear phishing. Other threats were designed to target users who are connecting remotely. And last but not least, threats targeting integrity and availability of data, especially ransomware type attacks. Therefore, the first thing we did was to supercharge our user awareness campaign, especially covering topics related to phishing attacks, secure user authentication, protection of personal devices, and more importantly, protection or tips to protect home networks. That was not high on the agenda before in terms of user awareness campaigns. Then we also did a quick validation of our existing security controls, particularly related to remote access, identity management, etc. We added some more stringent controls related to authentication and authorization, We minimized accessibility of non-essential services to our remote users, just to reduce the attack surface and overall risk. And we enhanced monitoring of remote access, particularly for privileged access. We also looked into our existing security processes and procedures and identified areas where we could add agility, especially to support our IT teams in terms of development and launch of essential yet timely digital systems and services. We put on hold some of our less essential projects, including some of the digital transformation projects, so that we can increase our due diligence on validating basic security hygienes, such as patching, etc. Since most of the threats that have emerged during COVID-19, we believe are taking advantage of lapse in basic security hygiene. And lastly, we are also focusing on shoring up on controls related to incident response and recovery, so that we can minimize as much as possible any adverse impact caused by a potential cybersecurity event. With that, actually, I'm going to pose this question to the other members of the panel. What are they seeing in terms of the fate or status of digital transformation projects? Are they seeing a rapid increase or rapid execution, or are they seeing more and more organizations putting digital transformation on hold?
Thanks, Akib. Yeah, I'll comment. Rapid7, we're certainly seeing over the past year or so a big push by organizations as they migrate and take this journey to become digital organizations themselves. So many of the projects that they entail are heavily security related. So up until the COVID thing happened, I think we saw a strong increase there. We weren't seeing a cost impact there. I think there was in many countries, I think there were sufficient budgets to be able to carry out these projects. I think that the thing that really, the challenge that many organizations had was the sort of second point there around resources on the operational side. The persistent issue that so many companies have, and that the number of people and the resources they have to manage security is really not commensurate with the needs of the organization. So they're operationally challenged from a people point of view. That obviously was exacerbated during COVID, severely exacerbated because of the increased workloads and all the pressures that we were just talking about. But we haven't necessarily seen a slowdown in some of that transformation. In fact, so many organizations have had to act very, very quickly, spin up new workloads, create new applications, etc., to deal with this very problem and work and go to market in a way that they didn't before. The transformation from bricks and mortar to selling online, so many organizations have gone through drastic change in these past weeks. And that in itself, as we know, when IT has to move quickly and goes through change quickly, there can be implications there for security. It'll be very interesting to see. But one of the other aspects we've seen is, with all of this pressure and extreme pressure on the security guardians, some of them have been looking for alternatives, whether using other third parties, or perhaps we'll go on to talk about it later, but other managed services and other ways to take away some of the immediate workload so that they can focus on what is most apparent and most urgent for them right now. That's what we've seen at Rapid7. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment.
Yeah, I would like to comment. As Saqib mentioned, that there was a small slowdown earlier towards the end of 2019, and it came to almost a stop around March and till 15th of April, mid of April. But then we see a lot of initiatives and quickening the pace of digital transformation, and that I think is going to continue quite rapidly now, because it came totally as it was totally unexpected. But most of the IT teams, especially with the organizations which are proactive, have really taken that approach and making their changes very, very rapidly, including, for example, offshore delivery models and things like that.
Fantastic. So remember, if you've just joined us, you've just tuned in from wherever you are in the world, remember we have our chats function available. So let us know where you are, what you're doing, and if you're enjoying the webinar as well. We also have a question function as well. We've got a lot of questions to get through. I can see a lot are coming through. I'm just going to ask a quick one now. It's quite a practical one connected to what's already said as well. So if you're attacked, how best to make sure that the impact is minimized? So basically not about the prevention, but once you are attacked, what are your then next steps? Briefly, if I can ask Sakib, what would you say?
So it's a, I guess, rather difficult question to answer, but well, first of all, you need to define what is considered minimized for your environment, right? So minimal impact for our organization may be, different for other organizations. So first of all, very important to understand and define what is considered, minimal impact or minimized impact versus high impact. Now there are various ways you can do that to figure it out. The most common ones will include conducting a security risk assessment where the impact is measured both in terms of tangible and non-tangible ways. Also consider if you have a business continuity program, look at your recovery time objectives, RTOs and RPO requirements. Once you have that understanding of what would be considered high, medium, or low impact, then it will make life easier to start implementing related controls. Now, let me talk about what some of the things that will help you if you have it in place, or if you put in place, it will definitely help you recover faster and minimize impact. And some of those would include presence of a streamlined and a robust solution, which can help you very well documented a strong incident response process, which is practiced continuously or frequently. Some sort of incident response orchestration technology or technologies, which can greatly help with the reduction of response time. You can also look into frequent, definitely backups are very important. And not only frequent backups, but properly securing those backups, especially putting in controls that can protect override. Also, if possible, having some sort of rapid response team to be available. Now, a bunch of technology providers offer this as a retainer service. The next one would be a very solid internal and external communications plan. You wanna, in case you, God forbid, get compromised, you need to control the narrative, both within your organization and outside. Because the last thing you want impacting your reputation. Definitely a disaster recovery plan, which accounts for interruption arising particularly from cyber attacks, and providing alternative infrastructure to enable the most critical services from a recovery perspective. And finally, very helpful would be having some sort of cyber insurance, which can provide you that immediate.
Saki, you done? Yes? Sorry, just there was a bit of a delay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
You just mentioned there, the last thing you said there about cyber insurance, corporate cyber insurance. That's one of the questions we've got from our audience members. Is it available, and how do you get it? Very briefly, Richard.
Yes, so it is available. And everything that Sakib just said is really revolving around planning, having that, it's inevitable at some point that there's going to be some form of breach, and the planning that goes into that, despite the fact that the prevention mechanisms may not have worked, the planning up front, the communications that will happen at the point of breach. And one of those communications is being able to work with the insurance provider and everything else down the line. So many of the classic general insurers that most companies would use now offer cyber policies. There are some that specialize, the classic global insurance heads like Lloyd's of London, etc., are now writing far more general cyber policies than they were prior. Some of them, the substantial ones, come with some prerequisites like having an assessment, a penetration testing assessment exercise done up front. but many do not. So that's certainly something worth considering. That, along with, as Sakib was saying, along with the planning, the communications, having a process to follow, and really, in particularly, having an incident response process to follow that that allows the organisation to know upfront what actions are going to be taken once a form of breach occurs.
Okay, fantastic. We have, gentlemen, guess what? We have got a lot of people on this webinar with a lot of questions to get through as well. So we're going to try and keep this as concise and compact as possible. So moving right on now to Sarah, but back to slide deck, more insights and more ideas.
Absolutely. I think, Peter, we are ready for our next poll.
Okay, we can have our next poll up on the screen. So the next question in poll number 2, here we are. So if you could read this and then answer it as soon as you can. Have you implemented any additional security measures as a result of the COVID pandemic? If you could answer that for us right now. We'll compile those results for you as I'm speaking right now. And again, just remember, we've got actually 48 different countries joining us today from around the world. So a shout out to everybody there. Just having our results coming through very, very shortly. There we are. So yes, 51%, no, 33%, and 16% not sure of really the answer to that question. Sanjeev, how do you make sense of these answers?
So I think that there are always leaders and leaders in the industry, and you'll find that those are the people who have taken the proactive measures and understood what is at stake. And as Sakib clearly mentioned, and so did Richard, on the kind of threats we are facing today, which involves a better communication, a safer communication for people working from home, better human awareness, so that, because that's the biggest challenge which we have, especially when you have people who are working on devices provided by the company, but they also use personal devices. It becomes very easy to be a victim. So there are a lot of people who have taken this, and I think this is generally in line with what we expected.
Okay, Richard, what's your perspective on this one?
I'm not surprised. I think many organizations have had to take additional precautions. We're also aware, Rapid7, we focus, we specialize on threat detection and response, and we can feel that in the number of people that are interested in reading our research, looking out for our white papers, people who come to our webinars, and I was going to say seminars, they're all webinars now, we're all doing this from home, but there's been we've noticed a shift, and you look at the shift of interest towards more around threat detection and response, and it's clearly because people want additional understanding, additional education and knowledge to help them protect their organizations. So we're certainly seeing that, yes.
Fantastic. Sarah, back to you now to continue with your slide deck.
Absolutely. If I can have the slides back, please. We'll have to go to the previous one, I guess. Sorry, I mean the one after this one. Yes, that's the one. I think the message on this slide is quite clear, and as the title says, these are unprecedented times, these are desperate times, and which is why the measures that most organizations are taking are also quite desperate at the same time. And these are actually some of the statistics that I'm sharing with you based on some of the research that we have done in the recent past, in the last couple of months or so. So on an average, what we are seeing across the board is roughly around 15 to 25% IT budget cuts. And you're really lucky if you are working with an organization that is not doing any budget cuts at all, or even if the budget cuts are, mid to high single digit as such. I think one of the other interesting trends purely from a cost reduction perspective is what we are seeing is many organizations are also reviewing their existing IT contracts, which essentially means that they are not just trying to look at different payment terms, flexible payment terms with the IT services providers, but also on the existing software licenses as well. And the same applies to infrastructure as well, and same applies to other areas in the overall IT stack as well. I mean, this percentage itself is roughly around close to 70%, which is quite phenomenal. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that the focus on cost reduction aspect or cost control measures is pretty much across the board, across industries, and across the world, I would say, at this point in time. And again, I think at the same time, there is obviously a lot of focus from organizations to reduce their capex, reduce their upfront payment. And again, I will repeat the same point which I mentioned earlier, trying to hold on to as much cash as possible in the current scenario, which is why you would see almost 40% of the organizations are actually working with their OEMs or their system integrators or IT services providers to find out more flexible payment terms. Purely from a services providers, they're looking at whether they can pay monthly or quarterly rather than signing up, big fat checks which are paid upfront or on an annual basis. And at the same time, we're also seeing purely on the IT infrastructure side, we're also seeing a lot of push towards the leasing model as well, which is purely on the hardware side of the business, I would say, as such. And at the same time, I think traditionally, if you look at the region, there hasn't been a lot of push, or there hasn't been a lot of adoption or demand for the offshore delivery models. But I think that is one trend which is clearly changing now, and it's gonna keep up in the coming years as well. And you would see this percentage of 30% organizations evaluating offshore delivery models. I strongly believe that this percentage will go up continuously in the coming years as well. Now, since we are talking about capex, I think we also have to look at cloud as well. I mean, cloud is obviously it has had a lot of adoption in the last couple of years, and purely from public cloud perspective. But at the same time, I think the adoption has primarily been mostly on the non-mission critical workloads, so things like collaboration tools or unified communications or workforce management, or even business continuity and disaster recovery on the storage and compute side of it. I think that is where we have seen most of the adoption in the recent past. But in the current scenario, we are seeing a lot of clients moving towards cloud-based security solutions as well. So all of this basically translates into two or three key points that I want to highlight here. One, I think going forward, not just because of the cost reduction measures, but also because of the fact that most organizations are looking to ensure that they are running their operations in a much more efficient way, not just only from a cost reduction perspective. I think there will be a lot more drive towards automation. Okay, that is one. And I think this is something that we would not only see in non-security workloads, I think that will come in the security workloads as well. And I'm going to talk about some of those tools, some of those technologies that are currently being considered or adopted by organizations from automation of security function as well. And the other important part, again, we're talking about multi-sourcing, because obviously what it helps is that as a buyer of IT products or services, when you have multiple vendors or multiple service providers working with you, it does give you a lot more flexibility to choose and pick. And at the same time, it also gives you an opportunity to squeeze and negotiate better terms with your suppliers. And if all of this was not enough, there's obviously a significant rise in the cyber attacks as well in the last couple of months, which is roughly around 43%, which is, I would say, is pretty much in line with the poll results that we had seen earlier. Now, let me just take a quick pause here and go back to Richard. Richard, during your interaction with some of the CXOs in the industry, especially from the region, I would say, what are you seeing? Do you see a similar trend during your interaction with the CXOs, or you think it is slightly different?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. The thing that jumped out to me most on that slide was the 23% looking at increased public cloud. I actually would have expected that number to be slightly higher, one of the higher numbers. And I think perhaps when we're all done, it will be. And the reasons are that we're seeing this in terms of the usage of the Rapid7 technology is very quickly increasing to cover public cloud environments. And I think the COVID situation has been a catalyst for many organizations that were either slow or a little reluctant in using public cloud. There's been a bit of a tipping point, because every organization, when working from home, has typically had to use some form of cloud service. And I think this has pushed some over to being more accepting. Historically, we saw some regions, some parts of Southeast Asia, some parts of Russia and CIS countries, and some parts of the Middle East being a little reluctant or a little slower to adopt public cloud. So we see that moving forward, and certainly with all the new increased workloads and apps, that is not surprising. The second one I noticed was the flexible payments and multi-sourcing. I certainly at Rapid7, we've been working with partners and customers to do work in our pro-COVID approach to help customers, really partner with them for the long term to ensure that some form of flexibility is possible. And I think we'll see that ongoing. The last one, though, and perhaps the biggest statistic there, I think was the 57% for automation and orchestration. And this is, again, an area that we focus on at Rapid7. We really have seen a significant increase. And as you said, Saurabh, not just in IT, there's been forms of orchestration and automation in IT from some time. In security, it's a relatively recent development over the last 2 or 3 years. But we've seen that classic sort of hockey stick growth more recently, particularly for the reasons we were talking about earlier, that we seem to have fewer and fewer security experts working in organizations, and they need more automation. They need particularly to take away some of the mundane work. You talked about phishing earlier, and so many organizations have been under significant phishing attacks, and they can, as you know, take up very significant amounts of time to go in and assess those. That's a classic use case example that can be brought down to just a few minutes, and then introducing orchestration so that the security guardian, they can take the important decisions of what they do with it, having all the grunt work done by some orchestration mechanism. So that bit, I'm not surprised to see at all. But overall, I think we'll see a lot more orchestration automation to come.
Okay, looking at the questions there, they're firing up, they're coming through very fast indeed. A quick question and a brief answer for Sanjeev. So Sanjeev, what are the backdoor vulnerabilities that people need to safeguard with the usage of software such as Zoom and Teams? Quite a relevant question for a lot of our audience right now.
Stop using them. Just joking. We don't have that luxury currently, but yes, I think encryption goes a long way, and as much of your traffic as you can encrypt, it'll be much better. That's definitely one of the encryption on top of what Zoom provides.
Okay, an answer short and sweet. Okay, what we'll do now is move on rapidly to our next poll. So we have our third poll of the webinar. We'll have that come up right now. There we are, poll number 3. Take a look at this and answer this as soon as you can. Given the current push towards cost containment, automation, and achieving higher efficiencies, would your organization consider leveraging cloud-based security workloads, i.e. security as a service? So take a bit of time, answer that question for us right now if you could, and we'll compile the results as soon as we can. A quick shout out to Jerry Asker from USA. He's joining us right now, and I'm sure it will far away, and had to get up early for this as well. So welcome, as well as many of the others as well. Remember, I think we have now 55 different countries joining us on this webinar. So the results coming through very shortly. Here they are. So yes, 63%. No, 15%, and almost a quarter not sure. Saqib, how would you make sense of these results?
So absolutely agree that there are numerous benefits of going to the cloud from a scalability perspective and in the long run cost rationalization perspective. But I also agree with Saurabh when he said most of the workloads are non-essential services and application and services. And I think one of the reasons for that, at least in this region, is the regulatory requirements. For example, in healthcare, from a regulatory perspective, the patient data cannot be on the cloud, especially if the cloud is not hosted within the country, and just general precaution. in terms of keeping patient data and other business sensitive data safe. But eventually, because of the situation we're in, because organizations were focused, even before COVID-19, were focused towards digital transformation, and it's very difficult to achieve digital transformation, especially scalability and time to market, without having cloud as the major aspect to your overall strategy. And so not only from digital transformation, also from cost rationalization, I think there's not much or few options other than cloud remain to achieve that. So I would see an increase in cloud adoption moving forward.
Okay, great. As we're going on, I can see on the chat side, I can see a lot of activity going on there. A lot of attendees are actually communicating with each other, which is great to see as well. Remember, everything that you see here, this whole hour session is recorded, so you have a chance to relive this, look at this again, and again, share it out to perhaps some of your networks as well. Over back to Sarah, back to your slide deck.
Absolutely. If I can have the machine learning and automation slide back, please. Excellent. So I think this slide is obviously quite important in the current scenario, and some of the points that we talked about cloud adoption increasing from a security standpoint. We also talked about automation. We didn't talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but hopefully we can touch upon some of those points as well on this slide. I think in the last one and a half, 2 years or so, one of the concepts or one of the solutions that we have seeing a lot more uptake in among the customers is SOAR, which is security, orchestration, and automation. And I think the general perception of the fact that automation means job losses, I do believe that it is quite unfair. In fact, automation actually helps you in gaining higher efficiencies. And at the same time, when the organization is looking at driving more and more critical projects or digital transformation projects, when you automate stuff, it also helps you create more capacity within the organization itself to drive or channelize your additional capacity towards more critical or different kind of new innovative projects as well. So I think that is one of the key trends that we are seeing. At the same time, I think SIM, security incidents and event monitoring, I think this has already been there for quite a while. I mean, in the last 5-6 years, so we have seen so much action, so many organizations adopting SIM solutions. Many of them have actually adopted SIM through a managed security services provider, while some have deployed SIM within their internal organizations as well. Now, at the same time, I would say at least in the last two years before, I would say many organizations that I have talked to, they would always have a SIM solution in place. But the point here is that the question again lies in the fact that if SIM is not installed properly, if it is not integrated properly, if you don't have the right analytics models, right use cases inbuilt into it, then it doesn't deliver anything at all. But at the same time, there are obviously a lot of benefits that SIM solutions offer. The first one is obviously it moves you from a reactive cybersecurity managing organization to a more proactive one. And obviously, it is a lot more beneficial as compared to your traditional log management. Secondly, it also helps you in embedding the use cases as well as artificial intelligence aspects as well, which also comes with the predictive analytics point as well. But at the same time, there are also certain challenges with SIM. One is it's obviously quite complex to implement and manage. Even if you deploy it internally, just implementing it internally doesn't really help you if you cannot optimize it or use it to the maximum possible extent. So again, for managing it as well, you need very high-end, very sophisticated, skilled workforce as well. At the same time, developing the use cases, it's not very easy as well, which is why you also have to, which is where you primarily have to rely on on the OEM or the platform provider or the channel partner or the system integrator, which is actually implementing it. So you're essentially relying on the intelligence or their expertise or their use cases, what they already have. Okay, so that's the other challenge I would say with SIM. And again, from a reporting perspective as well, I would say reporting in SIM is a lot more complicated, a lot more complex as compared to the next version of UBA, which is UAB, and I'm going to talk about that as well. And again, at the same time, if you look at the overall cybersecurity landscape, I mean, look at the last decade or so. I mean, if you look at their challenges, what are the major challenges within the cybersecurity space for the CIO or the CISO? getting the right skills has always been one of the major challenges. And I think it continues to be there right on top, even in the current scenario as well. So again, that is also one of the major challenges in SIM. When we talk about user and entity behavior analytics, which is UBA, it's first and foremost, I think the general perception is that can it replace SIM? The answer is no. It is not a replacement for SIM. It is actually a solution that can actually complement SIM in many ways. So first and foremost, in terms of benefits, obviously it is proactive, it is highly efficient as well. I think the best part here is that it also a good UEBA solution would also have a very strong machine learning as well as artificial intelligence component built into it. So that is one of the key criteria for you when you are comparing different UEBA products from different OEMs as well. And again, at the same time, it is highly automated. It obviously delivers the ROI in long term as well. From a challenges perspective, I would say it is a bit expensive, which often means that it sometimes is not very suitable for SMEs. It is a bit more complex than traditional UBA because in this particular case, it doesn't only give you the view of your user behavior, it also gives you a holistic view of your overall organization's behavior as well, and also the cybersecurity risk posture as well for the complete organization itself. And finally,
Sarah, I'm just going to jump in there only because of time. We've got a lot of questions, and it's a very popular webinar indeed. I'm sure we could go on for hours. Just going to jump into a question here. This is for Richard. Humans are often regarded as the weakest links during normal circumstances. As we navigate these unprecedented times, how can IT and security leaders curb the risk of human error without sacrificing productivity? So how can we keep that risk lower, but still have the productivity we need?
Yeah, it's a great question, particularly for this slide and everything we've been talking around automation and SIM and UBA. At Rapid7, we've really focused on trying to make the whole process of security simplified, and to take away that human error or that human aspect is really to automate. And the modern day SIM and UBA technologies at Rapid7, we have an Insight platform. Our Insight IDR does exactly that, along with the automation technology, takes away so many of those low-level human decisions that can be made in error. So the process and the flow is done and automated through SaaS solutions. And then, as we were saying earlier, freeing up time for the security guardians to really make the critical decisions and make those decisions that can really lead to make significant changes to the organization from a security posture point of view. So the short answer to it is automate using security technology. And the two technologies on the screen here, SOAR and SIM and UBA, are certainly ways to do that and dramatically reduce risk.
Okay, listen, we've got so many questions. We should have turned this into a cybersecurity quick fire round because we've got so many questions to get through. Just one more question here for Sakib. What security measures can we take to secure remote working? So if we can keep this concise, a kind of quick answer to that one. What security measures can we take to secure remote working, which again is so relevant for many organizations today?
Sure. So a secure connection, a VPN, secure connection, multi-factor authentication, and then just your basic hygiene, your antivirus patching up to date. And then lastly, looking at your home network to see what additional controls can be put in to protect your home network.
That answer was shorter than my question, I think. So well done. Okay, moving on now. We go on over to our next poll. So over to you, the audience. We'd love to hear what you think on this question. So question number 4: do you see automation and machine learning eliminating human cybersecurity professionals? Okay, so if you can give us your answer right now on that one, and what we'll do, we'll compile the answers right now, putting those together, and hopefully in a few moments we'll have the answers to that question coming up on the screen. Here we are. So yes, 24%, just under a quarter. Unanimous 68%, no, and not sure, just 8%. Sanjeev, looking at these answers, Is this what you would say if you were answering this question?
Yeah, this is actually, you will, I'm not surprised by the results because it will be a mixed bag of responses. It's very machine learning, and artificial intelligence will help you a lot in making structured decisions, but it will not help you make decisions which are out of the box, let's put it this way. For example, I'll just give you an example which has been often repeated, is in an HR, you can find out in an HR function, you could identify a good candidate based on the GPAs and the keywords in their personality tests, and they might be good for what you're looking for in a way. But imagine for the same thing, if Steve Jobs had applied for it, he might not have got the job. So if you're doing, you would require a lot of supervision by humans to make use of the machine learning and artificial intelligence solutions.
Fantastic. Okay, what we'll do right now is go over to the next slide, our last slide, I believe. So Saurabh, take it away. Over to you.
Sure. So last slide, please. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, just maybe 90 seconds. But I think in summary, what we believe is that managed security services does offer very strong, it does have a very strong value proposition for clients. And I think going forward, one of the interesting trends that we would see a lot many SOC as well as NOCs would be managed in an offshore delivery model within the managed security space. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the coverage. It pretty much covers the whole gamut of the IT infrastructure itself, right from your network till the application and endpoint layer as well. But I'm just going to spend maybe 30 seconds on some of the perceived challenges, and I'm going to re-highlight the point, perceived challenges that we see from a managed security services standpoint. I think first and foremost, many clients believe that the value proposition of managed security services is largely restricted to cost reduction, which is obviously not true. And at the same time, the overall ecosystem of MSSPs in the region, a lot of clients believe that it is not really mature yet, which is why many times you don't see very strong penalty clauses or the adherence to the SLAs as well, or the lack of ownership from the managed security services providers as well. And at the same time, given the fact that skills is such a major challenge in the current scenario as well, many clients, especially larger organizations, do believe that when the MSPs themselves are struggling with obtaining the right set of skill set, we are better off managing it ourselves rather than going to a managed security services provider. So on that one, I'll take a quick pause and I'm going to go back to Saqib and ask him, Saqib, what is your opinion on this? What is your take on the maturity of the supplier ecosystem or the service provider ecosystem in the region? Do you think that they are pretty good, or do you still see that there are significant improvement areas that the suppliers have to come up with?
So I think short answer would be there will always be room for improvement because the overall cybersecurity environment evolves very rapidly, and with all the digital transformation and cost rationalization pressures, there's definitely going to be need to make significant changes. But what I've seen, I've been in the region for about 10 years. I've seen major improvements in terms of the capability and service offerings, and I'm actually very encouraged and very hopeful to see more and more maturity in terms of managed services in the region.
Fantastic. Okay, what we'll do right now is again move it back to you, the audience. Our last and final poll number 5. Question number 5. Here we go. So, would you consider adopting managed security services to improve your organization's cybersecurity risk posture? So there we are. Yes, no, not sure. Answer that question for us right now. And we'll compile the answers as soon as we can and pop those on the screen for you as well. So remember, all the questions that have come through, we've got so many. What we'll try and do, if we can answer those offline, we'll try and do that. If not, to just send us an email and hopefully we can get those answered in some other way as well. Here we are. Here are the results. So yes, 74%. So almost 3/4, no 12%, and 14 not sure. Richard, looking at these answers again, are these the answers that you would expect from our audience?
They are actually, and I say that because this is what we have experienced in the last 2 or 3 months. So we've got a couple of things going on as we get feedback from our customers around the world. Not only are their workloads strong, but there's also some uncertainty as to the availability of their security guardians, you know, knowing whether they're going to be available because of COVID, etc. So that's increased pressure there. So many organizations like Rapid7 provide SaaS products, and most companies use them themselves. They've started to come back and talk to their partners like the Spires and all the other partners around the world and say, can you help me with this? Can you be the MSP to help me? So we've seen that increase, and Rapid7 is also an MSP. We provide our products as a managed service if customers need that. We've seen a big increase. The second thing is, I think that when we think about ongoing cost containment, managed services is a way, particularly if you're thinking of building a SOC or want some kind of SOC service, is a way of containing costs and not letting it spiral out of control. So we've had some increased interest because of that reason.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Gentlemen, guess what? We are coming towards the end of our 60 minutes together. So what I'd like you to do now is in 60 seconds, just under 60 seconds, if there was one message you want to share with our audience today on this webinar to our audience pretty much across the world, what would it be? So 60 seconds from each of you. We'll start with Sakib.
Sure. I know these are trying times, and we're not only facing an increase in the magnitude and sophistication of cyber attacks, but at the same time, we need to work on cost rationalization, considering the downturn in global economy. Therefore, we need to look for smarter and more efficient ways to do cybersecurity. I strongly believe that technologies such as RPA, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., will play a pivotal role in helping cybersecurity professionals in dealing with challenges ahead. Also, now more than ever, we need to put greater emphasis on making our end user more cybersecurity aware, since they are the weakest link in the overall cybersecurity chain. And the last thing, going back to the question about artificial intelligence taking over human analysts, I think that's far, far, far ahead. If anything, I would actually call it augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence, because it will help our human cybersecurity specialists become more efficient and be more and focused more on more critical type of cybersecurity requirements.
Okay, Sana, 60 seconds.
Absolutely. I think for me, I would say in these times, one is that one of the key takeaways for me, I would say, the first and foremost, you need to realize, you need to identify what exactly, how much damage can you actually take. So you have to have that baseline in the system itself. You have to have that baseline data with you. And at the same time, you have to have your RPO, RTO, recovery times, all of that in place. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to you. Once you're hacked, you are pretty much running around all the places without even knowing what you're trying to not secure, but at the same time, you don't know what you're chasing, basically. So I think for me, that would be really one of the key areas. And at the same time, I think during these times, yes, we are talking about automation. We are talking about things like artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think one of the key takeaways for me also when it comes to these technologies is invest in training as well. You have to train your resources to the best possible extent to ensure that they are able to deliver and use all of these solutions as well as technologies in the long term to deliver whatever value they can deliver for your organization.
Okay.
And these are my key takeaways here.
Fantastic. Sanjeev, a few words from you within 60 seconds.
Yes, I think what is most important, and Sakib touched upon it a little earlier, is cyber hygiene is very, very important to get your vulnerabilities fixed, to have your configurations right. Human awareness is very, very important. Secure communication of remote workers, and restricted access, optimally restricted access as much as possible, and look at managed security services to cut down your cost and improve your security posture.
Okay, and sorry.
I think are very, very important.
Okay, and finally, Richard, one message that you would share with our audience right now to give them the value from this webinar, what would you say?
Yeah, one quick message I think is planning. There's never been a greater need to do more comprehensive planning than prior, for all the reasons we've been talking about today, about the pressures upon organizations and security guardians. getting all the basic things in place, as we talked about, multi-factor, vulnerability management, etc. But also planning how to do more with less. This problem is not going to go away, and certainly the resource problem is never going away, right? So the automation, automating threat detection, etc., getting a plan in place. It can be a multi-year approach, right? It doesn't all have to happen now, and with cost constraints, it can't all happen now. So putting together a 1, 2, 3 year plan and how you're going to get the organization to a more secure state is a job worth doing today.
Okay, so remember, everybody tuning in to this, everybody we've heard from today, if you want to ask them a question or link up with them, I'm sure they'll be happy to link up with you on LinkedIn if you want to take the conversation even further. This webinar will be recorded and online as well, so you can relive everything that we've gone through and that's been unfolding throughout this last 60 minutes. And again, GISEC Live events, we'll be doing more of these during the year, so stay tuned for the next announcement, and nothing can really replace the live event that we've got going later on in the year, hopefully in September. So keep tuned for announcements on that one so we can actually meet face to face. Basically, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to say thank you and goodbye to Richard, Sakib, Sarab, and Sanjeev. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully for everybody involved, it's been insightful. We put a bit of clarity on these uncertain times and hopefully move forward with a little bit more ease and a more comfortable way of going forward. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again at our next live events.
Thank you.